why most of this country is still empty. So before we move through Australia's most remarkable places, we'll uncover what actually controls life here and why everything connects. And later, one overlooked detail explains it all. Australia doesn't feel empty by accident. That emptiness is engineered by the land itself. Nearly 70% of Australians live within about 50 kilometers, roughly 30 miles of the coast. Not because they prefer the view, but because the interior quietly pushes back. Move inland, and the rules change fast. Rainfall drops sharply. Soils thin out. Distances stretch beyond anything most people are used to. In some regions, towns are separated by 300 kilometers, almost 190 miles or more, with nothing in between. No fuel, no water, no backup. And that's not a historical problem. It's a daily one. Australia is the driest inhabited continent on Earth. On average, it receives less than 500 millimeters of rain per year, under 20 inches. But averages are misleading. Some areas can go years without meaningful rainfall, then receive a year's worth of rain in a single week. That instability shapes everything. Rivers don't behave the way they do elsewhere. Many flow only part of the year. Some disappear underground. Others end not in the ocean, but in salt lakes that evaporate before they're ever reached. Water here isn't scarce. It's unpredictable. And unpredictability is harder to build around than simple absence. This is why early European settlements failed repeatedly. Crops that thrived elsewhere withered here. Livestock routes collapsed. Entire communities were abandoned after just a few seasons. The land didn't care about effort. What did survive were systems adapted over tens of thousands of years. Indigenous Australians lived here for at least 60,000 years, possibly more. But they didn't fight the land. They read it. They moved with seasons instead of resisting them. They used controlled fire, not to destroy, but to manage growth, drive animals, and renew soil. Some landscapes Europeans later called natural were actually carefully maintained over generations. When that knowledge was disrupted, ecosystems changed. Fire became a threat instead of a tool. Today, bushfires can move at speeds exceeding 20 kilometers per hour, about 12 miles per hour under the right conditions. Once they start, stopping them is often impossible. You don't fight them, you wait them out. And fires aren't the only force at work. Australia sits on one of the oldest pieces of continental crust on Earth. These rocks are ancient, worn down by hundreds of millions of years of erosion. That's why mountains here tend to be broad and low, rather than sharp and dramatic. But that age comes with a cost. The soil is exhausted. In many areas, nutrients were leached away long ago. Plants evolved to survive on almost nothing. Animals followed. That's why Australian wildlife looks so different. Marsupials dominate not because they're superior, but because they're efficient. They require less energy. They waste less water. Even trees adapted. Many shed bark instead of leaves. Others twist their leaves edge-on to the sun, reducing water loss. Everything here is optimized for restraint, and that restraint defines scale. Distances in Australia distort perception. What looks close on a map can mean 8 hours of driving, nearly 500 miles, with no services. Phone signal disappears. Roads turn to dust. Mistakes compound quickly. This is why self-reliance matters more here than almost anywhere else. In some remote regions, emergency response times are measured not in minutes, but in hours or even days. You don't assume help is coming. You plan as if it isn't. That mindset bleeds into culture. Australians value practicality over appearance, preparation over optimism, humor over panic. There's a reason the phrase "no worries" exists here, and it's not because nothing goes wrong. It's because worrying doesn't change the outcome. But here's where things get interesting. Despite all of this, the heat, the distance, the instability, Australia still draws people in. Not just visitors, settlers, builders, communities. Because once you understand the rules, the land becomes readable. You learn when to move, when to stop, when to wait. And the places that do flourish here aren't random. They sit at the intersection of water, access, and climate stability. Small advantages compound over time. That's why population patterns here look so extreme. Dense clusters along the edges, vast silence in between. It's not emptiness, it's structure. And as we move through Australia's most remarkable places, one by one, you'll start noticing that same invisible logic everywhere. At first glance, this feels like pure beauty, clear water, bright colors, endless life. But the Great Barrier Reef isn't just something to look at. It's a system that quietly keeps Northern Australia alive. Stretching over 2,300 kilometers, about 1,430 miles, it's the largest living structure on Earth. So large, it can be seen from space. But what matters more is what it does below the surface. The reef acts as a natural breakwater. It absorbs wave energy, protecting the coastline from erosion and storms. Without it, many coastal areas would slowly disappear. It's also a biological engine. Thousands of species depend on it. Fish, corals, sharks, turtles, forming a food web that supports entire coastal communities. When the reef weakens, Fisheries decline. Tourism follows. Local economies feel it almost immediately. Water temperature here usually sits between 23 and 29 degrees Celsius, roughly 73 to 84 degrees Fahrenheit. Just a few degrees higher, and corals begin to bleach. That narrow margin shows how sensitive the balance really is. This isn't a static wonder. It's alive, reactive, and constantly adjusting. And once you understand that Australia's most iconic paradise survives on such fine margins, it becomes easier to see why life here clusters so tightly along the edge. Because just inland, the rules change fast. At first, it feels timeless, dense, quiet, almost unchanged. This rainforest is older than the Amazon, estimated at over 180 million years, compared to the Amazon's roughly 55 million. That difference matters. Here, plants didn't evolve to spread fast. They evolved to survive stability. Some species still rely on fruit-eating birds and animals that disappeared long ago, adapting only just enough to continue. Rainfall can exceed 4,000 millimeters a year, about 160 inches, feeding rivers that swell and shrink without warning. In the wet season, roads flood, movement slows. Nature sets the schedule. What makes this place unusual isn't just biodiversity, it's compression. Within a short drive of less than 50 kilometers, roughly 30 miles, you pass from reef to rainforest to river systems that all depend on each other. That connection explains why disruption here travels fast. Clear one area, and the effects ripple outward. This forest doesn't dominate the land. It negotiates with it. And once you see how life survives here by adapting instead of expanding, you start noticing something else along the coast, a stretch where land gives way completely to water and wind. From above, everything looks calm. Scattered islands, pale sand, shallow water. But this region is shaped by constant motion. Tides here can shift water levels by more than 3 meters, nearly 10 feet each day. Sandbanks appear and vanish. Channels move. Navigation depends on timing, not distance. The sand itself is unusual. In some areas, it's over 98% silica, so fine it doesn't retain heat. Even under direct sun, it stays cool enough to walk barefoot. A small detail that hints at how different the environment really is. These islands don't support large freshwater reserves. Most vegetation survives on rainfall alone. Human presence remains temporary by necessity. That limitation keeps development light and forces balance. Everything here works because nothing overstays. And when you follow that idea far enough, it leads to a coastline where sand stops being an island feature and becomes the entire foundation. This is the largest sand island on Earth, stretching over 120 kilometers, about 75 miles in length. Which raises an obvious question. How does anything survive on sand? The answer lies beneath the surface. Organic material slowly built up over thousands of years, creating pockets of soil just deep enough to support forests. Some trees here grow over 45 meters, nearly 150 feet tall, rooted entirely in sand. Freshwater lakes form naturally as rain filters downward, trapped by compacted layers below. The water becomes so pure that sunscreen isn't allowed in some areas to prevent contamination. Movement here follows strict rules. Standard vehicles fail. Only modified transport works, and even then, tides decide when travel is possible. This place isn't fragile, but it is precise. Small mistakes carry large consequences. And once you understand how life persists on something so unstable, the contrast ahead becomes impossible to ignore, where sand gives way to glass towers, crowds, and a very different relationship with the coast. At first, this coastline looks effortless. Long beaches, warm water, and a city that seems to flow naturally along the ocean. But the Gold Coast works only because it is constantly managed. This area was never meant to hold a large population without intervention. Much of the land behind the shoreline was originally swamp and floodplain. To make settlement possible, engineers created an extensive canal system that now stretches more than 400 kilometers, roughly 250 miles. These waterways regulate flooding, drain excess rain, and redirect water during storms that can drop over 200 millimeters, nearly 8 inches of rain, in a single day. The ocean presents a different challenge. Powerful currents move sand continuously along the coast, reshaping beaches year after year. To prevent erosion, sand is regularly pumped back onto the shore, carefully maintaining the shape of the coastline. Without this effort, entire sections would slowly disappear. This is a place that survives through constant adjustment rather than natural stability. Every beach, every canal, every barrier exists because someone planned it that way. And once you start noticing how much effort it takes to keep this balance intact, the contrast becomes clear just a short distance away, where development loosens its grip and the coastline begins to feel less controlled. Here, the relationship with the ocean feels noticeably different. The coastline curves outward, fully exposed to open water, with waves that have traveled thousands of kilometers, well over 1,200 miles, before reaching shore. That exposure shapes both the land and the mindset of the people who live here. This area marks the easternmost point of mainland Australia, and the climate reflects that position. Warm systems from the north occasionally reach this far south, while cooler fronts still move up from below. The result is a landscape that stays green but never fully predictable. Unlike larger coastal cities, development here remains intentionally restrained. Buildings stay low. Roads follow the land rather than cutting through it. Population density drops quickly once you move away from the shoreline. What replaces scale is rhythm. Farming adapts to seasonal changes. Tourism rises and falls with weather rather than trying to override it. Life here responds instead of imposing. That adaptive balance feels calm on the surface, but it's fragile. Move just a little farther inland, and the environment tightens its rules. Temperatures shift, moisture drops, and the terrain begins to rise, changing how both people and weather move through the landscape. From the edge, the view feels vast, almost endless. But this isn't a single valley. It's a high plateau carved apart by deep gorges over millions of years. The land rises more than 1,000 meters, about 3,300 feet above sea level, enough to reshape climate patterns across the region. Temperatures here are often 5 to 10 degrees Celsius lower, roughly 9 to 18 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than the coast, even on the same day. Moist air slows as it climbs, forming fog and cloud that can settle for hours. The blue haze that gives this place its name comes from eucalyptus oil released into the air, scattering light and creating a constant veil across the valleys. Historically, this terrain acted as a barrier. Early routes inland were limited, slow, and risky. Even today, distance matters less than terrain. Short drives take far longer than expected. And once you pass beyond this elevated edge, the continent opens dramatically, revealing a different scale altogether. Quieter, drier, and governed by forces that no longer negotiate. This is where Australia stops negotiating. Distance here isn't measured by kilometers alone, but by isolation. The interior covers nearly 70% of the continent, yet holds only a tiny fraction of the population. In some regions, settlements are separated by 300 to 500 kilometers, roughly 190 to 310 miles of open land. Fuel, water, and shade become planning decisions, not conveniences. Rainfall is unreliable. Many areas receive less than 250 millimeters a year, under 10 inches. When rain does arrive, it often comes all at once, turning dry ground into impassable terrain before disappearing again. Rivers may flow strongly for weeks, then vanish for months. Temperatures regularly exceed 40 degrees Celsius, about 104 degrees Fahrenheit in summer. At night, they can drop sharply. Survival depends on preparation, not strength. What defines this region isn't emptiness, but control. The land dictates speed, movement, and limits. Mistakes don't accumulate slowly here, they compound. Yet people continue to cross it, work it, and live within it, guided by experience rather than optimism. Roads follow logic, not convenience. Communities form where water appears, even briefly. And at the heart of this vast interior, the land begins to rise. Not dramatically, but with a presence that shifts everything around it. Here, the scale changes from horizontal to vertical. The land doesn't stretch endlessly, it concentrates. This formation rises over 340 meters, about 1,100 feet from the surrounding plain, visible from tens of kilometers away. What matters isn't the height, but the isolation. Nothing else interrupts the horizon in the same way. Temperatures here mirror the extremes of the interior. Summer days often pass 38 degrees Celsius, 100 degrees Fahrenheit, while nights cool quickly. Rainfall averages just 300 millimeters a year, roughly 12 inches, arriving unpredictably. Water collects briefly in shallow channels, then disappears. Plants respond by growing slowly and conserving energy. Animals move with time rather than territory. For indigenous communities, this place is not a landmark, but a record. Stories, law, and knowledge are embedded in the surface itself, passed down across thousands of years. The landscape isn't symbolic, it's instructional. Modern access follows strict boundaries. Movement is controlled. Observation is encouraged. Interaction is limited. And once you leave this concentrated core behind, the environment shifts again, trading stone and silence for wetlands, rivers, and a rhythm set by seasons rather than scarcity. This landscape operates on cycles instead of extremes. Here, water returns, not permanently, but predictably. During the wet season, floodplains can stretch for hundreds of square kilometers, well over 100 square miles, transforming dry ground into shallow inland seas. In the dry season, those waters retreat, leaving fertile plains behind. Annual rainfall often exceeds 1,500 millimeters, nearly 60 inches, a dramatic contrast to the interior just hours away. Rivers expand, then contract, shaping ecosystems that depend on timing rather than permanence. Wildlife follows that rhythm. Birds arrive in massive numbers. Fish migrate through newly connected channels. Plants complete growth cycles in narrow windows. Human presence adapts as well. Indigenous land management here is seasonal, guided by subtle environmental signals rather than calendar months. Burning, hunting, and movement align with water levels and wind. This place shows a different version of control, not resistance, but cooperation. The land allows life to flourish, but only for those who understand when to move and when to wait. And as this journey continues westward, those seasonal patterns give way once again into terrain shaped by time, erosion, and some of the oldest rock formations on Earth. From above, the landscape looks almost artificial. Hundreds of striped domes rise from the plain, shaped by layers of sandstone laid down more than 350 million years ago. The orange bands come from iron-rich rock, the darker stripes from cyanobacteria that cling to the surface, slowly altering the stone itself. These formations stand only 250 meters, about 820 feet high, but their isolation amplifies their presence. Surrounding terrain offers no distraction. What you see is all there is. Rainfall here averages just 600 millimeters a year, roughly 24 inches, arriving mostly in short, intense bursts. Water carves narrow gorges between the domes, briefly transforming dry channels into flowing corridors before disappearing again. For much of the year, access is limited. Roads flood. Movement slows. The land controls timing. For Indigenous communities, this area holds deep cultural significance, with stories tied directly to the shapes and pathways carved into the rock. The formations aren't abstract, they're read like a map. And when you leave this isolated stone world behind, the terrain softens. The land opens outward toward the sea, and the focus shifts from erosion and time to tides, light, and movement along the coast. Here, the continent finally meets the Indian Ocean. The transition is immediate. Tides in this region can exceed 9 meters, nearly 30 feet, among the largest in Australia. Entire stretches of coastline appear and vanish twice a day. Boats rest on dry sand, then float hours later in deep water. That rhythm shaped everything. Early industries depended on timing rather than force, most notably pearl diving, which once drew workers from across Asia and the Pacific. The town grew not through scale, but through connection. Heat dominates daily life. Temperatures regularly climb above 35 degrees Celsius, about 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and humidity lingers even after sunset. Unlike inland settlements, water here is abundant but restless. The ocean offers opportunity, but only to those who respect its cycles. This place doesn't fight its environment, it waits for it. And as the coastline fades behind, the road turns inland again, away from tides and trade, toward a landscape where water retreats, rock hardens, and distance regains control. At first, the land feels empty. Then it suddenly opens. Deep gorges cut through ancient rock, some plunging more than 100 meters, about 330 feet below the surface. These formations expose layers of Earth that date back over 2.5 billion years, making them among the oldest visible rocks on the planet. Water appears unexpectedly here. Seasonal streams carve narrow passages, feeding permanent pools shaded by stone walls. In summer, air temperatures can exceed 40 degrees Celsius, about 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Yet water in the gorges remains cool enough to shock the skin. Movement becomes vertical. Descents are slow. Steps matter. Mistakes carry weight. Nothing here invites speed. Everything demands attention. These gorges exist because water persisted just long enough, over unimaginable time, to overcome solid rock, not through force, but repetition. That same pattern defines much of Australia's interior, change driven by patience rather than pressure. And as this journey continues, the landscape begins to bend again toward the coast, where ancient stone gives way to reefs, currents, and a very different relationship between land and sea. At first, this coastline feels unusually accessible. The reef sits close to shore, sometimes just 50 to 100 meters, roughly 160 to 330 feet from the beach, close enough to reach without a boat. That proximity changes everything. Unlike offshore reef systems, this one interacts directly with land. Nutrients wash in. Tides move quickly. Life concentrates near the surface. Large marine species pass through with surprising regularity, following seasonal currents rather than fixed routes. Water temperatures range between 22 and 28 degrees Celsius, about 72 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit, warm enough to sustain coral but cool enough to remain stable most of the year. That balance keeps bleaching events less frequent than in many other reef systems. Human impact here remains limited by geography. There are few large towns, long distances between services, and strict access controls. Development never fully took hold, not because of policy alone, but because the land didn't invite it. This coast shows what happens when proximity replaces scale. The ocean feels reachable, but never predictable. And once you step away from that narrow band of water and sand, the landscape hardens again, pulling inland, upward, and back into stone shaped long before the sea arrived. These mountains don't rise sharply. They unfold. The ranges stretch for more than 400 kilometers, about 250 miles formed from sediment laid down over 600 million years ago. What remains today is not height, but exposure. Layers once buried are now visible, folded and eroded into open ridges. Rainfall here is scarce, averaging around 250 to 300 millimeters per year, roughly 10 to 12 inches. When rain does fall, it rushes through dry channels, briefly activating landscapes that spend most of the year waiting. Vegetation reflects that rhythm. Growth is slow. Roots run deep. Animals move opportunistically, responding to water rather than territory. For indigenous communities, these ranges are a record of time, with rock formations tied to law, story, and movement across the land. The terrain isn't a backdrop, it's a guide. What makes this place significant isn't isolation alone, but clarity. The land shows its history openly, without cover. And as the terrain lowers again, that clarity shifts into cultivation, where harsh conditions give way to soil carefully managed rather than endured. This landscape feels controlled in a different way, not resisted, refined. The valley sits within a natural rain shadow, receiving just enough moisture to support agriculture without excess. Soils vary over short distances. Clay holds moisture. Sand drains quickly. That diversity allows different grape varieties to thrive side by side. Some planted more than 150 years ago, among the oldest continuously producing vines on Earth. Summer temperatures regularly reach 30 degrees Celsius, around 86 degrees Fahrenheit, but cool nights slow ripening, preserving acidity and balance. Human presence is deliberate. Towns remain small. Fields follow contours. Expansion is cautious. This valley works because it respects limits, water, heat, soil, instead of pushing against them. And once you leave this carefully tuned environment behind, the journey continues toward places where boundaries loosen again, where land meets ocean with force, and balance must be renegotiated once more. This island feels separated not just by water, but by time. Roughly 110 kilometers, about 70 miles long, it broke away from the mainland thousands of years ago, and that isolation changed everything. With no introduced predators for most of its history, wildlife here evolved differently. Populations remained dense, behavior stayed natural, and ecosystems balanced themselves without constant interference. Even today, large portions of the island remain protected, shaped more by wind and fire than by roads or towns. Weather is the main architect. Strong Southern Ocean swells hit the coastline directly, carving cliffs and collapsing weaker rock. Inland rainfall averages around 500 to 600 millimeters a year, roughly 20 to 24 inches, enough to support forests and farmland, but never in excess. Fires play a defining role. When they come, they move fast. Recovery follows a familiar pattern, with native vegetation adapted to regenerate rather than resist. And as the journey continues eastward, isolation gives way to motion, where land no longer stands apart from the sea, but is steadily reshaped by it, kilometer after kilometer. Here, the coastline becomes a process rather than a place. The road follows cliffs carved by relentless wave energy from the Southern Ocean, where swells travel thousands of kilometers, well over 1,500 miles, before striking land. Erosion is constant. Limestone stacks rise, weaken, and collapse, sometimes within a single human lifetime. What looks permanent today may not exist tomorrow. That instability is the defining feature. Cliffs here reach heights of up to 60 meters, nearly 200 feet, exposed directly to storms that arrive without obstruction. Wind, salt, and spray limit vegetation, keeping the landscape open and raw. This route wasn't built to conquer the coast. It was carved into it, slowly, acknowledging that the land dictates terms. Construction itself took more than a decade, often interrupted by landslides and weather. Driving this stretch compresses time. Distances are short, but progress is slow. The road curves constantly, forcing attention outward rather than forward. And once this exposed edge is left behind, the environment changes abruptly, trading salt and wind for cooler air, deeper forests, and an island landscape shaped by rain instead of waves. Crossing to this island feels like stepping into a different climate system. Temperatures here are noticeably cooler, with summer highs rarely exceeding 22 degrees Celsius, about 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and winters shaped by moisture rather than heat. Rainfall varies dramatically. Western regions receive over 2,500 millimeters a year, nearly 100 inches, while eastern areas remain far drier. That contrast creates sharp ecological boundaries over short distances. Mountain ranges funnel weather systems inward. Rivers run year-round. Soil stays young compared to the mainland, replenished by constant erosion rather than exhausted by age. This is one of the few places in Australia where temperate rainforest still survives. Trees grow slowly. Moss covers everything. Silence feels heavier. Human presence remains limited by terrain. Roads twist. Travel times stretch. Large-scale agriculture never fully took hold outside select valleys. What defines this island isn't remoteness, but resistance to scale, speed, and simplification. And as the journey continues northward again, the climate softens, the land flattens, and cities begin to appear shaped, not by isolation or erosion, but by access, movement, and connection. This city wasn't shaped by a single advantage. It grew because it learned how to adjust. Its layout spreads wide rather than rising high, shaped by flat terrain and a temperate climate that rarely reaches extremes. What truly defines this place is movement. The city's tram network extends more than 250 kilometers, about 155 miles, making it one of the largest in the world. Streets were designed for flow, not speed, which explains why walking remains central to daily life. Water shaped growth here as well. Early settlement followed the river, not the coast, prioritizing access and trade over exposure to open ocean conditions. That decision reduced vulnerability to storms and allowed infrastructure to mature steadily. Culturally, this city developed inward rather than outward. Neighborhoods became distinct, self-contained, and walkable. Food, sport, and public space all reflect that pattern. This isn't a place built to impress immediately. It reveals itself gradually. And as the journey continues north, that sense of restraint gives way to a city shaped far more by geography than planning, where land, water, and history intersect in a much tighter frame. Here, geography leads and development follows. A deeply carved harbor splits the landscape into natural compartments, forcing growth around water rather than across it. The harbor stretches over 20 kilometers, about 12 miles inland, creating countless bays and inlets that dictated where early settlement could expand. Bridges and ferries became necessities, not luxuries. Climate plays a quieter role. Average summer temperatures hover near 26 degrees Celsius, roughly 79 degrees Fahrenheit, moderated by sea breezes that cool the city even on hot days. That balance made outdoor life central rather than seasonal. This is a place where beauty is structural, not decorative. And as the coastline falls away and the terrain opens slightly, attention shifts from commerce and access to something else entirely. Intention in a city designed to function first and symbolize second. This city wasn't discovered. It was chosen. Positioned inland to avoid coastal rivalry, it was planned from the start, with geometry replacing organic growth. Broad avenues align with surrounding hills. Sightlines were calculated. Space was preserved deliberately. Elevation sits around 580 meters, roughly 1,900 feet above sea level, giving the city cooler winters and warm, dry summers. Temperatures swing more sharply here, reinforcing seasonal rhythm rather than coastal consistency. Population density remains low by design. Open land separates districts. Green space isn't left over, it's intentional. And as the journey moves on, urban planning gives way again to adaptation, towards cities shaped less by intention and more by trade, distance, and the pull of the western edge. This city is easiest to understand by starting in its center. Right in the heart of town, the main market has been operating on the same site for more than 150 years. It's loud, crowded, and practical. Local produce, baked goods, seafood. This isn't a tourist add-on. People actually shop here. Just a short walk away, wide parklands completely surround the city center. No highways cutting through, no concrete barrier. You can walk from downtown into open green space in minutes, and that layout changes how the city feels. Along the coast, long beaches stretch uninterrupted, backed by simple promenades instead of towers. What makes this place interesting is how quickly the surroundings take over. Within less than 30 kilometers, about 18 miles, vineyards appear. Many planted by the same families for generations. The transition feels immediate. And as the journey continues west, closeness gives way to something very different. A city defined not by what's nearby, but by how far everything else is. This city opens with one of the most unusual sights in Australia. From the edge of downtown, a massive inner-city park drops straight down toward the river, offering wide, uninterrupted views. Following the river, long walking paths and bridges connect the center to waterfront districts, marinas, and beaches. The coastline remains open and accessible, not fenced off by private development. Further south, historic port areas reveal how this city grew outward toward the Indian Ocean rather than inward toward the continent. Trade routes here face west, linking directly to Asia and Africa. Suburbs stretch far, connected by straight rail lines and highways that reflect distance rather than density. And when the journey turns back east, that openness tightens toward a city shaped by curves, crossings, and constant movement along water. This city makes sense once you follow the river. Instead of running straight, it bends and loops through the center, creating pockets of neighborhoods along its edges. Ferries move like buses. Bridges become landmarks. Water isn't an obstacle. It's part of daily transport. Right near the center, public spaces blend into cultural landmarks. Museums, galleries, and performance venues sit next to riverside parks, artificial beaches, and open plazas. Climb higher, and lookouts reveal how quickly the city fades into green. Growth is visible everywhere. New districts rise along the riverbanks. Old industrial zones are repurposed instead of erased. What makes this place compelling isn't a single landmark. It's how movement never stops. This is a city still forming, not chaotic, but alive. And with that, the journey reaches its end.